Welcome back to The Compass, and today we're discussing data gaps. In this episode, our guests discuss how research ownership and data gaps prevent the Global South's ability for impact. They discuss the barriers they face and the creative ways that they found to share knowledge.
My name is Adebukola Daramola. I'm an associate professor at the Nigerian Institute of Social and Economic Research, Niser, in Ibadan, Nigeria. We do research on socioeconomic issues, and we also provide policy advisory to the government.
Hello, I'm Margarita Beneke de Sanfeliu. I'm the director of the Center for Research and Statistics at FUSADES and think tank in El Salvador. We also do socioeconomic research, and we also have a branch that we call the Action Tank in FUSADES. We see ourselves as an action tank and a think tank. So, as the director of the Research and Information Center at FUSADES, this topic that for this video, which is research ownership and data gaps, it's great. I think it's not an academic debate, but it's a requirement. It's not a nice to have, but a demand. So thank you for inviting me.
I'd say that data is currency, and it's currency in the knowledge ecosystem. Data is the raw material that you analyze in your research, and it is what ultimately determines the quality of the knowledge products that you bring forth. Okay. And whoever gets to analyze and interpret data also wields the power to determine the policy agenda, more or less, and has the power to frame narratives, as well as the power to determine what really matters, what are the problems that are critical. Okay, so this is how data translates into power in the knowledge ecosystem. You find that when you have access to data, when you're able to analyze and interpret data, and then you're able to control the debate, and you're able to drive the debate much more than someone who doesn't have access to that kind of data. Yeah.
I agree. Totally agree. The data is a currency. I call it data access. It's like a gatekeeper. And you mentioned that when you have the right data, you can do the right research. But if not, you will wind up doing the research that somebody else thinks is important. In El Salvador and Central America, where we work, we face the challenge of having to build our analysis on limited data and incomplete data or too aggregated data. Sometimes when we want to do an analysis, we get national averages, but local problems are different, and within the same locality, and understanding what needs to be changed in that locality requires disaggregated data by age, by gender, by whatever. And usually we get the national average. Sometimes not even the national average, but the regional average. And that hides a lot of important details. So the narrative is limited. If we want to gain control of the research process and then not to generate relevant knowledge for our context, we need data. Data is crucial.
Yeah. I'd say that in the Nigerian context, we have huge data gaps. So we have these secondary databases from the National Bureau of Statistics, the central bank, but we find that in terms of the timeliness, there's a problem. So right now we have a national statistical bulletin that will give you figures around macroeconomic indicators, for example. And the latest we have as of today is for 2024. And this is the last quarter of 2025. In fact, the year is almost ending. So those gaps, the currency of data is an issue, and it can be very problematic when you want to do research. And I think these are the gaps that international organizations now tend to come to fill in. And, they tend to tell you, okay, this is the forecasts for your country for next year, when it should be coming from you. So this is where we are. But right now we have some private initiatives, okay, giving us some sub-national level data. You spoke about the fact that there are national aggregates. It's also similar in Nigeria. We have a lot of aggregates, but we have private think tanks coming in recent times to provide sub-national data for people to work with. And that has been really helpful in Nigeria.
That's great. At FUSADES, the center I direct, we generate data. We have a system of quarterly and monthly statistics to try to get the more timely data on what's going on the macroeconomic level. But we also do some research and primary data collection for specific projects. But they're limited, like one time. When funds run out, data runs out. Yeah. So there's our periodic data system is limited to that area, and it's costly. So we cannot afford to do it at the same timely in other areas. And we depend on projects that comes from international organizations and others. So the challenge is funding, I think, for the private think tanks that you mentioned, which we are. So I can relate. This is Nigeria, West Africa, this is El Salvador in Central America, and we're seeing similar challenges. Yeah. And I believe that if we could find a way to generate subnational and disaggregated data, even for research, particular projects, we could come a long way from where we are now.
So if we could snap our fingers and change one thing in the data ecosystem, I'd say for me it's about mainstreaming routine administrative procedures into a data pool. So if you have perhaps rules guiding collection of data in government offices, then it should be easy to integrate all of this. And, we have so much of data in Nigeria. we have the National Identity Commission. There's the Population Commission. Your bank has your data. Your phone provider has your data. But there's just no harmonized data pool. And when we want to talk about demographics, when we want to talk about population growth, it still boils down to guesstimates. So I think it's about integrating, like I said, all of these pools and harmonizing, and where we don't have the data captured, putting some kind of instrumentation to be able to capture data, like I said, in the informal sector. Yeah.
Yes, and I would add that we need the way to make all that data open access. Carefully considering all the data protection and privacy, because that's another issue that we need to consider, privacy. But if we could make like all publicly funded data generated somewhere to make it publicly available and harmonized and useful in a useful format, that would be like ideal. That's like, if I could snap my finger, that would be it. I think it's more or less the same thing you said. I would like to bring the conversation to Southern Voice. because I think being part of this network, it's like an asset.
It is.
And we can know that Southern Voice, and make a call to action to Southern Voice, that they could help us close the data gap. And by bringing together those of us who generate primary data to pool our resources, how we measure something may be useful to somebody else. That some other think tank in Nigeria or Indonesia or wherever, they don't need to reinvent the wheel. We already have some framework. You have some frameworks. All our colleagues who generate data have some frameworks. Let's pull them together so we can learn from each other. And I think that would bring more visibility also, because we're generating some kind of framework that can be useful for others, even for the big global institutions. And also, you mentioned that data is currency, and who has the data has the power and shift the narrative.
Yeah.
So we could use the power of being in a network to shift the power, because it's not the same like I'm like a think tanker from a small country, but we're talking in a collective voice. So that would make it more visible and give us more power to own and benefit from the data.
Yeah, I agree that Southern Voice is a credible platform to enable us achieve that kind of synergy. And I think we could work out some kind of instrument where, at least for those data that are in the public domain, you can share. I can share what is in the public domain for Nigeria. For example, in the Southern Voice database, you can share what you have for El Salvador, so that if we want to do cross-country comparisons, for example, we don't have to start looking all over. Searching, data search could take up sometimes 80% of the time you want to use for your research. It can be very frustrating. So a one-stop shop, that could help in Southern Voice. Yes.
Actually, I'm very optimistic for the future.
Yeah,
because I see that things are starting to shift, and these new technologies, digital innovation, all give us tools to help us generate data, and also give us more autonomy. Maybe they're cheaper, so we don't need that much funds, but we need to be careful. But that digital innovation, I think, has a lot of possibility in the data generation area. And we still starting to see this, but it's a very promising that we see large global institutions, and specifically private philanthropic organizations, funding Southern think tanks to generate data. We would like to see more of that. So, but it's starting to happen. So if we use this global platform like Southern Voice, we may push for more, not project-based funding, but core funding to support us generate periodic data, or the data we need to be effective in our context. And something that I'm seeing in my team, the push of the young, because they're very eager to use all this new technology. And we need to build a platform where this energy and enthusiasm from the youth can be put together with all this accumulated wisdom of the not so young, of the elders, because that will be very powerful.
Okay, so research ownership and data gaps. There's several barriers, but I think Southern Voice offers remarkable opportunities that we can leverage to be able to close some of these gaps, okay, and make the best of our data and of our locally sourced data, okay. to address the problems that are confronting us in the global south. Like I said, data is currency. If we have access to it, there's a lot more we can do than if we did not have access to it. And it determines the quality of our product as think tanks.
Yes. This conversation has shown us that data is an important topic, and data leads to power. You say currency, I said data access is like a gatekeeper. So, but we have optimism. I have optimism because I've seen of all my colleagues in this network that we are incredible, resilient. We seek innovation and ingenuity, and we somehow generate the data and the analysis we need to do. We have, as local organization in our countries, we have the expertise. We have been developing technical autonomy, and we are establishing our own standards of rigor, because we can see in the different members of the network that do research that we aim for that rigor and the quality of research. So actually, the goal for us should not be validated. Like if the external actors think that we have value just because we work with global institutions, but because our own work. And we have an opportunity to work towards that. We need to provide a common platform, and I think Southern Voice can do this, where we can share, we can have mutual learning and a collective narrative power. That can Southern Voice provide. So I think we should aim to ensure funding models that support sustained institutional capacity, and it includes generating periodic data so we can do more localized, contextual, relevant research. And that will give us more data power to control the data, use the data and benefit from the data. And when I means me, I don't mean we think tanks, but our collective people in our countries.
That's all for this episode of The Compass. Join us next week, where we'll discuss how our members are changing narratives in practice. See you then.
So when we talk about South-South cooperation and also to look to the Global South solutions that are already there, it's extremely important for us to learn the lessons, not only the good practice, but also the lesson learned from other countries and other subnational governments as well, because it saves us time and we no longer have time.